Hey everybody, I hope you're doing well today. This is Brad Cartwright from Econ Course Companion, and we are going to take a look at profit theory, the third section of the first unit of theory of the firm, which is, of course, called cost, revenue, and profit. And it is in this video that we will take those things learned in the cost video and those things learned in the revenue video and put them together to see if and when and how we demonstrate profit in a diagram for a firm. And of course, it will always depend on what market structure they are functioning in. And those four market structures are, as you know them, perfect competition, monopoly, monopolistic competition, and oligopoly. So let's take a look first at some terms and language we need to know. Before we get going, so we're all talking the same language, let's take a look at some key terms. Economic profit, normal profit, abnormal profit, normal profit, loss, and economic profit, abnormal profit, or supernormal profit, normal profit, or loss, which is also known as negative profit. All right, what's economic profit? Economic profit is a firm's total revenue minus its total costs. So we're going to take a look at first the cost, then the revenue, subtract them, and what do you get? Whatever's left, and that'd be economic profit. If a firm has something called abnormal profit, is one of these economic terms that, like, you think you know what abnormal means and you think you know what profit means. Of course you do. You put them together and it means something different. But this time it means, or abnormal profit refers to positive economic profit arising when total revenue is greater than total economic loss, and that includes implicit plus explicit costs. Normal profit, the minimum amount of revenue that a firm must receive to keep its business running. Normal profit is when a firm covers all of its costs, all of its economic costs, okay? And remember, economic costs, even though it doesn't have a parentheses there, is implicit plus explicit costs. And this is the case where, normal profits were like, hey, everybody gets paid, including the entrepreneur. Everybody gets to go out to dinner at the same rate they did last year. Everybody gets to go on the same vacations they did last year because they covered all of their costs, including paying the salaries and wages of all workers. Then, lastly, we have a loss, which is also known as negative profit or negative economic profit, which refers to the difference between economic loss and total revenue of a firm when economic costs are greater than revenue. Okay, so those are the key terms, of course, economic profit being the big one. But what you're going to see is that you are going to be asked to show abnormal profit or normal profit or loss given a certain market structure. And we'll take a look at what those are in a little bit. Next slide, please. All right, some more key terms. You need to know what these prices mean, okay? Not these prices. What these terms mean. The shutdown price, the break-even price, and the profit maximizing level. And there's a key term here, and I'm going to stress it. We're going to stress it with red. Output. The profit maximizing level of output, and I'll come back to that in a second. Okay. The shutdown price, what is that? That's where P equals the average variable cost curve. And that is the price at which a firm that is making losses and will stop producing in the short run. Let me read that again. The price at which a firm that is making losses will stop producing in the short run. In perfect competition, it is when price equals the average variable cost. If price is greater than the average variable cost, the firm will go on producing in the short run, even if it is making a loss. So the key here for the shutdown price, and I'll show you with some data in a second from Jocelyn Blink, is this. Can the firm cover its average variable costs? Second point, the break-even price. And by the way, I'm giving you these terms so that we're speaking the same language. So you have the definition. So when I get up to a little bit later in the video, you can know the language and have comfort with it, okay? The break-even price, that is a price at which the firm breaks even, meaning that its total revenue are just equal to its total costs or economic costs. At the break-even price, the firm is earning normal profit. Hey, check it out. That goes back to the previous slide. Yeah, the break-even point is when, firms are covering all their costs, and therefore, they're making a normal profit. Everybody's getting paid, right? And then lastly, the profit maximizing level of output, that is where MC equals MR. This is a super important point on all diagrams moving forward, as you shall see. And that is the goal of firms, according to standard economic theory of the firm, is to maximize profit, okay? It involves making profit as large as possible and is achieved by producing the level of output where the difference between marginal revenue and total cost is the largest. The difference between total revenue and cost is the largest. And that's also where, by the way, MC equals MR, or put that into real words, marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue. All right, so there are some terms. Hold on to those ideas, write them down in your notes, make sure you understand what that means in terms of like words on a page, and then now we're going to work on the conceptual part of it, which is taking a look at some examples and putting this to work. Here we go. All right, take a look at these three firms, Firm A, Firm B, and Firm C. And this data comes to us from Jocelyn Blink's Course Companion. It is excellent, excellent, excellent. That's why it's the most used Course Companion in the entire world. But what do we have here? We have Firm A, Firm B, and Firm C, okay? And what you want to look at, and we're trying to decide what firms are making abnormal profit, what firms are making normal profit, and what firms are making a loss. Okay, so we have total revenue across the top here, and you can see that all three firms are making $200,000 a year. All three of them have a total fixed cost of $40,000 a year. The firms, though, however, have a different variable cost per year, $80,000, $100,000, and $120,000. The implicit cost is the same for all three firms of $60,000, $60,000, and $60,000. Remember, these implicit costs are the costs that of the opportunity cost of the entrepreneur that he or she could earn doing something else. The salary he or she could earn by doing something else besides being the entrepreneur for this firm, plus whatever costs the firm or the entrepreneur could earn by renting out the spaces instead of having a factory and making stuff, okay? So those are the costs. So here's how you figure out if somebody's making abnormal, normal, or normal profit or a loss, is you take a look at the total revenue, right? You add up 40, 80, plus 60 is 180. And so you look and you say, wait a minute, their costs are $20,000 less than their revenue, and therefore, firm A is making a normal profit. But perfect, right? All right, so star. All right, what about Firm B? Firm B is making a total revenue of $200,000, and then you take their revenue, right? Hold on to that for a second, and then you add up their costs. Fixed cost 40, variable cost 100, implicit cost 60, and their total costs therefore are 40 plus 100 plus 60, which are 200 grand. You take that total cost and compare it to the revenue of the firm, and you find out that Firm B is making a normal profit. Hey, check it. It's not that complicated once you start getting into it, okay? So now let's check out Firm C. How are they doing? Well, they have the same revenue of 200 grand, but what are their costs? 40, 120, and 60, okay? You add that up, and what do you get? 220. Dude, their total costs are more than the total revenue, and therefore, Firm C is making a loss, okay? I kind of feel like giving them a star, too, because they are in business. They are trying. There you go. All right. But you see right there, right? What you want to do is add up the total revenue, and then subtract the total costs. And remember, total costs imply fixed, variable, and implicit costs. In a second, what we're going to do is, in general, by the way, these implicit costs are considered to be fixed, right? And fixed costs, by the way, fixed costs are costs that the firm has to pay for whether they have any revenue or not, whether they are in business or not. It's sort of like I rent my house here in Santiago. If I have revenue, which is an income from the teaching of my IB students at an international school here, whether I have that revenue or not, I have a fixed cost of paying my rent. So whether I have a job or not, whether I have revenue or not, whether I have income or not, I have to pay for the rent of this place. And firms, of course, have to pay for the rent of their buildings as well. And whether they produce or not, it doesn't matter. Their fixed costs are the same. What changes are the variable costs. And variable costs start happening, by the way, and this is going to be very important in a second, when the firm opens up. When the firm is hiring one worker, when the firm is hiring two workers, when the firm is paying the costs out of its pocket to buy the materials to make the goods. So variable costs are the costs actually, in our economic sense here in IB economics, that the entrepreneur, the owner, has control over. The fixed costs are fixed. The variable costs are dependent on decisions made in the short run by the entrepreneur about how they're going to spend their money. Remember that dearly closely. All right. Now, let's take a look at a different situation, right? And we're going to now try to figure out specifically what the shutdown price would be of a firm. So this means at what point should a firm stop operating? Okay. Because why? Well, you're going to see in a second that everything has to do with whether or not they can cover their variable costs. But here's how I think it's best to think about it the first time through. Instead of thinking about a firm being open and then shutting down, think about a firm that has shut down and is trying to decide whether or not it should open up again. Okay, this data comes to us from Jocelyn Blink again, and the example that I'm going to use, she has an example of Archie, Batcat, and Charlie, which are pretty funny names. I don't know Ms. Blink, but I imagine that Ms. Blink has quite the sense of humor because a lot of the things she puts in her book are they're humorous. They're light. They make the study of econ more enjoyable instead of being something heavy and traditional. But in any event, let's just imagine for a second that instead of these being, and she says in her course companion that they're making comic books, but let's just say Archie, Batcat, and Charlie own a ski rental shop, okay? And I live at the base of the Andes Mountains, and the mountains have ski resorts. They have 4 of them. But at the bottom of the hill in Santiago are where all of the rental equipment is. So that means that when tourists come to visit Santiago and they want to go skiing, they tend to get their rental equipment down here in Santiago. Then they go up 10,000 feet up this crazy road, or 3,000 meters up this crazy road, same distance, and they get to the ski resorts. Okay, but in summer, which is summer right now in Santiago, guess what? Those ski rental shops, they're shut down. Why are they shut down? This is why, because they realized that it's more expensive for them to stay in business than it is for them to stay open. No, said that backwards. It's more expensive. Yeah, no, I said it right. It's more expensive for them to stay open than it is to stay shut down. Or if you think about it as a situation where right now in the summer in Santiago, these shops are not open. You go down this one road called Las Condes, and all along Las Condes, you will see several shops that are shut down, and that over the top of them they say ski rental, which is pretty hilarious when it's super hot outside. Why are they shut down? Well, because they know that if they open up, they're not going to sell enough things in the summertime in order to cover the cost of the person sitting in there who would be selling goods to customers. In other words, let's say that it costs, $10,000, right, a month in fixed costs for this rental shop to keep the firm. In other words, $10,000 a month in fixed costs. What do those fixed costs cover? The rental of the rent payment for the location and any sort of interest they might pay on loans that they borrowed. Okay, so $10,000. Whether they are open or not, that owner has to pay $10,000 a month. So if they open up, right? If they open up or not, they have to pay 10 grand. So the decision's not about covering the $10,000. The decision's about whether or not they can cover the expenses of opening up. And opening up would include hiring somebody to sit there all day long, hoping that during the summer months, somebody comes in and wants to rent ski gear. So let's just say that it costs them $1,000 to pay somebody to sit there all month, but they only, had like $300 in business. Well, what happened to their costs for that month in the summer? Well, they raised their costs $700 by opening up. Right? Because of the $1,000 that they paid someone to sit there, they only made $300. So it cost them $10,700 that month to be open. It would have been better for them never to open up. So the shutdown price is not about the total costs. The shutdown price is about the variable cost. Rather, better said, the shutdown price is not about the fixed costs. It's about the variable costs. The firm is going to open up only when it can cover the $1,000 it needs to pay in order to pay that person to sit there for a month and have the shop open, right? Otherwise, if they open and don't make $1,000, they're making their costs worse for the month because they already have to pay 10 grand. Okay, so if that shop opens up and for whatever reason they sell $1,000 worth of stuff, they have $1,000 worth of revenue, and at the end of the and that $1,000 covers, right, the wage of the worker there, then you can see that, well, if they cover their variable costs, they still have to pay the $10,000 a month for the rent and the interest payment, but they kind of broke even for the variable costs. So at that point, they're kind of here nor there whether or not they open up. And as Jocelyn Blink points out, it might be better for them to be open if they can cover the variable costs, just so that people realize that they're still in business and blah, blah, blah. They can, go back there if they want to, whatever. I don't know, fix their ski gear in the middle of the summer, right? And then, of course, though, if they open up and they still have $1,000 in variable costs, but that month they make $1,500, well, then it made sense for them to open up, right? Because their variable costs were $1,000. They had $1,500 worth of revenue. And so they covered the variable cost of $1,000 and they took the extra $500 of revenue and applied it towards that $10,000 fixed cost. And therefore that month, their fixed costs were reduced from $10,000 to $9,500. Remember that, folks. That is a super important understanding. It's something really important that you need to have in your mind about the shutdown price, okay? So what happens then, the most important thing is what happens with the variable costs, okay? You got that? If total revenue cannot cover the variable costs, the firm should shut down. All of these firms, I'm going to go through the numbers right now, but all of these firms are going to make a loss for the month. But the question is, are they adding to the loss by opening up? Or would it be better off for them to have stayed shut or shut down? Okay? So, here is some language. The shutdown price is where P equals AVC. And the shutdown price is the price at which a firm that is making losses will stop producing in the short run. In perfect competition, it is where P equals AVC, average variable cost. Okay? If the price is greater than the average variable cost, the firm will go on producing in the short run, even if it is making a loss. And I might need to make this point clear again, right? We're talking about the short run. All right, so let's take a look at three firms, three rental shops, Archie, Batcat, and Charlie. Yeah? And the numbers have changed, but just it's the same principle, right? If Archie has a revenue of $80,000 by opening up, what he needs to make sure he covers is the total variable costs. If the total variable costs are greater than the revenue, then he should shut down. Or, in the case of the rental things, and this is why I think it's better to think about it the other way around, right? Not open back up. So the total costs, right? Okay, they're 100 plus 100, which is 200, but their losses that month are $120,000, and the losses are greater than the fixed costs, and so that firm Archie's firm should not open up, or if they're already open, they should shut down. Okay? Batcat, what about Batcat? Well, now that I've reduced it down to as simple as a way as I think possible, the total revenues are 120 grand. Forget the fixed costs; those are already spent, whether they're open or not. What are the variable costs? 120. Check it. They covered their variable costs with their revenue by staying open, and therefore their losses are $100,000. They're still losing, but but that's equal to their fixed costs. So Batcat, kind of, 6 in one, half a dozen in the other, whether or not they open up or not, right? If they're open, they still lose 100 grand. If they shut down, they still lose 100 grand. And this is the example of, a firm that's just, barely covering its variable costs. And so it's either here nor there whether or not they stay open. And it might be, though, better to stay open just because, a shop being open all the time is more attractive to customers. Now let's take a look at Charlie. Charlie's revenue is 150 grand. Right? The variable costs are 140 grand, but even though the variable costs went up, since revenue went up, guess what? Is the revenue greater than the total variable cost? Yes. And therefore, Charlie should not shut down because his losses, right? This 150 grand covers all of that 140 plus the 10,000 extra is applied to the fixed costs, and therefore, by opening up, Charlie reduced his fixed costs that month from 100,000 to 90,000. Okay, the shutdown price is super important. It can get really confusing for you if you don't realize that what you need to look at is the variable cost. If the revenue of opening up or the revenue of continuing in business is less than the total variable cost, regardless of what the fixed cost, that firm should shut down. All right, so that is the shutdown price. So the way that would look on a curve is pretty straightforward, right? What we got to do now is take a look at the different curves, right? The shutdown price is where P equals AVC. If MC, so what are our revenue curves? So these are our revenue curves. Our revenue curves are marginal cost curve, the marginal cost curve, the average variable cost curve, and the average total cost curve. Okay? So these three curves are the cost curves that we carry forward from our unit on costs, right? So the shutdown price is, in this scenario, P. Why? Because at this point, where the marginal cost curve covers the average variable cost curve, that is where all of the variable costs of the firm are met. So this price would be analogous to the slide before, like Batcat, right? They just covered their variable costs. Okay? So at this price, the firm is able to cover its average variable costs in the short run because price equals the low point of their AVC, which is always going to be where the marginal cost curve intersects the average variable cost curve, right? Remember when you draw these curves, the marginal cost curve must intersect the average variable cost and the average total cost at their low points, okay? So therefore, this firm is only losing its fixed costs, and any price below P, the firm will shut down in the short run, right? Because this is the cost of all of their average, well, their average variable costs, or their variable cost divided out by output. Okay? So shutdown price, super important. Here it is on a graph. You saw the data. You should be able to translate that information over to this graph and to show that the price, the shutdown price is where marginal cost equals or intersects with the average variable cost curve, which is always going to be at its low point. All right. So that's the deal for the shutdown price. Now, the break-even price is a little bit easier, right? A little bit easier. What does it mean, break-even? Well, this is the kind of thing that's like so logical that you get it all muddled in economic jargon and it can get super difficult. The break-even price, look, if you were to sell pizzas and it cost you $10 to make the pizza and you sold it for $10, guess what you would have done? Break even. What is that point? Well, if your costs are $10, you need $10 worth of revenue in order to pay your costs. So where is that point? It's very simple. It's where price equals the average total cost. So the average total cost, this is total cost divided by output. So the output here, right, will create a price better said, where the marginal cost curve crosses the average total cost curve, which is at the bottom of it, at its lowest point, that is the break-even price. And this is the revenue box, which would be P1, Q1, if we were to draw this down, that would cover all of the total costs of the firm, right? If we had a pizza joint, right, and it cost us $10 to make a pizza, and we sold it for $10, then this price quantity combination would cover our cost, which is $10. Okay? So at the break-even price, the break-even price is P1. At this price, the firm is able to cover its total cost because P1 equals average total cost. And this firm is breaking even, right? They've covered their variable costs plus their fixed costs, and variable costs plus fixed costs equal total costs. And you average that out by putting in the output factor, and you get that point right there. Okay, so that is, my friends, the break-even point, or the break-even price. Now, we are going to take a look at the profit maximizing level of output, which you need all of these factors in, together here to make sense of the profit theory, right? The profit maximizing output, and I'm going to put another output, level of output is the key part of that, the key idea there. So what does that look like? Well, the profit maximizing level of output is generally thought to be the goal of firms. It involves making profit as large as possible and is achieved by producing the level of output where the difference between the total revenue and total costs is the largest. And you will find that point where MC, marginal cost, equals MR, marginal revenue. So in perfect competition, now we're going to look at two different situations here. The profit maximizing level of output, you may have noticed, has pushed us towards combining cost curves, marginal costs, and revenue curves, okay? So we are operating in perfect competition, and therefore, if marginal revenue is greater than marginal cost, the firm should increase its production. Where MC equals MR, it is profit. It is the profit maximizing point or the profit maximizing level of output, which is going to be Q. All right, so check out the videos on the construction of the revenue curves. In perfect competition, you have a perfectly elastic revenue curve, which is both price equal to demand, equal to average revenue, equal to marginal revenue. And the point, and then you're going to draw the average cost curve. So we are now combining costs and revenue, and we want to know where our profit maximizing level of output is. In other words, what quantity of stuff would enable us to maximize our profits? It doesn't mean we're going to, but it means we could. And no matter the market structure, whether they are price takers like perfect competition or price makers like monopolistic competition, or oligopoly, it's always going to be where MC equals MR. So where is that point? Well, here is the MC curve coming down, and it rises up, and right there is where MC equals MR. And that is the profit maximizing output. And this is a really important point because when we finally calculate all of our profits, this point is going to be where we start our analysis, okay? So if this is the output that they can maximize their profit, then it's going to be a very important factor for the firm. All right, so that is the profit maximizing level of output, how to find it in perfect competition. All right, now let's take a look at the profit maximizing point in the other market structures, which are monopolies, monopolistic competition, and oligopolies, okay? So this is the slide you just saw before, and what I did was I just put the other market structures on here so that you could compare and see that it's actually the same ideas, right? But it looks different because the market structures here, monopoly, monopolistic competition, and oligopoly, they are price makers. They can make their own price. And as a result of them being able to choose, the more they lower their price, the more output they are going to be able to sell, right? Or the lower the price, the more output demanders would be willing to purchase, and therefore we have a downward sloping demand curve and also average revenue curve because demand always equals average revenue. And then because we know about the relationship between marginal revenue and average revenue from previous videos, we know that the marginal revenue curve descends at twice the rate, roughly, or even exactly, as the average revenue curve. So what do? Well, I'm telling you, and this is what I tell my students, like, look, draw the revenue curves, then draw the marginal cost curve, then check out, because MC is going to be your dominant, most important curve on all of these diagrams. Where does MC equal? Marginal revenue. Where does marginal cost equal marginal revenue? Well, right there at Q, my friends. Okay? Now, in the other market structures, the price makers, monopoly, oligopoly, monopolistic competition, what you're going to do then is you're going to find this quantity, find where MC equals MR, and you are going to go up to the demand curve and find the price that these firms will get for the quantity of goods that is at the point of profit maximization. Super important, my friends, right? So what do? You come in here and you say, okay, I need to show the profit maximizing point on a diagram that has a revenue similar to price takers, which are monopoly, monopolistic competition, and oligopoly. You draw your curves, bam, bam, revenue curves. Then you draw your MC curve, bam. Then what do? You find where MC equals MR, you go up to the demand curve, and then find that price level. And this is the revenue, P times Q, total revenue, that would give the firm the best chance of being profitable, therefore everything depends on what their costs are. Because if this is the profit maximizing level of output, then what matters is if this is the output, they need to know what their revenue is here, and they can figure it out, and then subtract from that revenue their costs, and what's left over is profit or not. Okay? So the profit maximizing level of output is a critically important thing to be able to find, and it's always in both market structures where MC equals MR. You're looking for the quantity though, remember? It's the level of output. It's the level of output, okay? And the level of output is most critical, and it's always where MC equals MR. All right. So now, putting it all together, right? Now everything is set. If you look over here, this is the slide. I'm sorry, the graph from the last slide. So therefore, we know now that the profit maximizing level of output is where MC equals MR. We draw that up here, right? We find the price. Here is the profit maximizing level of output and the price the firm would get for it if it's operating in a price maker market or monopoly or perfect competition, okay? So now translate over here what's going on. Well, if we are asked to show abnormal profit in a monopoly or monopolistic competition, guess what? We have the power to draw it. And what the IB says to you is draw it. They give you a scenario, monopoly, abnormal profit, draw it. You draw this diagram, and then you know that in order for them to be profitable, they have to have the intersection of their average total costs, and Jocelyn Blink reduces that down to average costs. This is the same curve as the average total costs. If the firm can cover, or when the firm covers its total costs, it is the chance to be profitable. And in the way in which this curve is drawn, they have become profitable. That's their break-even point. That's their break-even point, okay? And here it's drawn below the market price. So the average variable cost curve, the average cost curve, which is also known as the average total cost, same curve, average total cost, average cost curve, the same. At point B, every part of that price that's above point B, above their costs, that's all profit. And of course, it's abnormal profit because their average costs are covered at a price lower than what it took for them to make it. Okay? So if we were asked to show abnormal profit in a monopoly, we would draw that diagram, then go, ooh, abnormal profit. Okay, the intersection of the average cost curve must be between these 2 points. And the really important thing is that you draw, and I tell my students this over and over again, is this point right there. That's the low point of the average cost curve. Not here, there, where average cost equals marginal cost is the low point. Remember that from the previous slide? And then you go over, and where the average cost curve hits the profit maximizing quantity, boom, you draw your box, and that is abnormal profit. Okay. Now, you might be thinking ahead like, wait a minute, I see something else going on here. And maybe if you wanted to draw, and I'm going ahead of myself, if the average cost curve were drawn in such a way that it were tangential to point A, if the average costs are met right there, then you would show normal profit. Hey, you're right. Check it out. Check this slide out, my friends. Check it. Okay, so this is the slide from the previous slide. That's not the slide. This is the graph from the previous slide. And then let's look at different scenarios. This was abnormal profit, and that's an example here of AC. Now, if you want to show normal profit, which is where the firm just barely covers its costs based on the profit maximizing revenue, you draw a tangential point there, which is AC1, Jocelyn Blink's diagrams, right? At point A, what happens? The price equals the average total cost, which is also called average cost, and therefore they break even where? Right at the moment where all of their costs are covered. And that is all indicated by the profit maximizing output. Now, if you want to show a loss, so if you're asked to show a loss in a market structure of monopoly, then you would take this quantity, forget these other curves, and extend it up, right? And then you would have to draw your average cost curve so that its lowest point is at the MC, at the marginal cost curve, and then draw up, and where your cost curve crosses the profit maximizing quantity, you would draw over, and this is your cost now, because your costs are higher than the price, and that box right there would be, you guessed it, a loss, okay? So that box is the loss. This box is abnormal profit, and of course, the line, which is between right here, that is normal profit. Okay? So it's very, very important. Repeat again. It's very important that you realize that the first thing you do, I'll go over on this curve. The first thing you do, revenue curves, right? Draw your demand curve. Then draw your marginal revenue curve, right? Of course, the demand curve is also the average revenue curve. Then you draw your marginal revenue curve. The marginal revenue curve must go down into negative territory. Then you draw your marginal cost curve, right? Then you stop. Or no, you don't stop yet. No, then you find where MC equals MR. You take that quantity, right, and you drive it up to where it meets the demand curve, and you find that price level. Then you stop. And then you look at the question, and the question says, yo, man, show abnormal profit. Okay, then you draw your AC curve with its low point there, right? And because point B is lower than point A, you'll show abnormal profit. Or you back off, right? And you go, hey, you know what? I need to draw an average cost curve. It's tangential here, the lowest points on marginal cost curve, and you draw this curve. That's normal profit. Or you draw all of this, and then you go, ooh, I got to show a loss. And you say, okay, that's cool. I can do that. I'm going to take my quantity. I'm going to extend it up. Maybe you don't have to do it that far, right? And then you are going to draw your average cost curve. So its low point is at marginal cost and goes up here. And where that average cost curve cuts the quantity, boom, you have a intersection there, and this box, like basically C1, C2, DA is showing a loss. All right, that is super important. That is critically important. That is the marriage, the putting together of the cost curves, the revenue curves, well, the cost curves and the revenue curves. You're going to draw the revenue curves first, and then the cost curves on top of them. Okay, so that's the theory. Those are the diagrams. That's how you draw it, assuming that firms are going to want to maximize profit. But that's not always true, because in economics, nothing's always true. Why? Because economics is human behavior, people. And because it's human behavior, you have to think like people don't always act that way. There's always something to evaluate. And one of the great things about econ is that, you do all of that, and then you have so much stuff to say afterward, because in the evaluation, even though you show all that stuff, that all of that might not be true, because not always are firms really profit maximizing. What they might be doing, they could be revenue maximizing, which means they are trying to measure success, or they might want to measure success by the amount of revenue that they produced, as opposed to the profit maximizing level of output. So this would be greater revenue, right, but less profit. Their other goal could be growth maximization, right? And this is actually a strategy for a lot of new firms that are trying to grow fast, right? Gain market share. And then oftentimes entrepreneurs are looking to sell that company, because if you show growth, even though you're not profitable, the way markets or the way companies are priced is they're priced at their value spread out over 5 years in the future. So if you've shown great growth, the value of your company, if you want to sell it, is much higher because you've grown quickly, right? Even though you're not profitable, the growth creates more opportunities in the future for prospective buyers of your company, okay? Then there's also this idea of and I think this is a ridiculous term. I don't like it. I make fun of it all the time in class. It's called satisficing. I don't know why I don't like this word. There's something about it that just rings hollow, or like, wordsmithing, creating words out of nothing. It's a real word. But the thing about satisficing is it's where an economic agent, a person, a human being, aims to perform satisfactorily rather than to a maximum level in order to pursue other goals. And this is just like human behavior. Like, we're not always maximizing our desire for profits. And if someone owns a small business, sure, they can stay open until 12 o'clock every night and like maximize profits. But guess what? They're not going to spend any time with their family. So in some senses, all of us, if we have any heart in us, are satisficing, because you can't just work all your whole life, because then you won't fill up your soul. You won't have the other aspects of life that make you so full, right? You gotta have joy. You gotta have leisure. You gotta go to the beach, to the mountains, to nature, vacation. Well, every time someone goes on vacation, they're not profit maximizing, right? Of course not. But satisficing is the idea that someone's motive is not to maximize profit, but rather to pursue other goals. Pay your bills and then enjoy life. And then the last one, which is a bit controversial just because it's kind of become popular, is corporate social responsibility. And some people say this is where business includes the public interest in its own decision-making process. And some people will take corporate social responsibility and just cut it down as like a marketing thing. And yeah, maybe it is. Maybe firms are just being kind to the environment because it's good for their, quote, brand. But ultimately, guess what? I'm cool with that. All right. If it brings you greater sales, but you're caring better for the environment and you're taking care of the longevity, you're being a good citizen, you're being a responsible citizen as a firm. But that means that it's not genuine. You're just doing it for marketing reasons. I don't know. What's the point of corporate social responsibility? Is to think of others, right? It's to expand its the care and gentleness in which we live on this planet as human beings. And plus, of course, some companies are super corporately responsible, and they have social responsibility as one of their main tenets. Patagonia, by the way, Patagonia gear is probably one of the best in the world of taking care of its goods, and maybe not profit maximizing because they raise their costs because they buy recycled products as much as possible to put into their jackets and all their outdoor gear. Yeah, great. They're not profit maximizing, but they are, genuinely wanting to be socially responsible as a corporation. All right, that is a long video, my friends. I know, but I decided to do it all in one video so that you could have the entire lesson together. Okay? I hope that as you go through your studies of economics, you realize it's just human behavior. Remember that. It's critical. It's empowering that you know that. And this long lesson is the culmination of the first unit, cost, revenue, and profit. And it shows you how profit is derived based on the difference between revenues and firms' costs. All right, my friends, be good. Take care of yourselves. I hope you found this video to be helpful, and we'll talk to you in a bit.